It was past midnight when the rain started, not a light drizzle, the kind that blurs the road into a moving sheet of grey. I'd been driving for 14 hours straight, eyes burning, and all I could think about was finding a place to park the rig and shut down for a while. The GPS flickered, signal lost somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Montana. I was between towns, nothing but 2 lanes cutting through black woods on both sides. Then, through the mist, I saw it. A glowing sign, half dead, buzzing like a dying insect. 247 truck stop. I'd never heard of it, and I've been on these roads for 20 years. But when you're tired, you stop asking questions. I pulled in. The lot was almost empty. 2 other trucks, both old models, engines off, no lights inside. The rain was coming down in sheets now, hammering the roof of my cab. I grabbed my jacket and stepped out. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and wet asphalt. Inside, the place looked frozen in time. The kind of diner where the walls were yellowed by decades of cigarette smoke. And a single jukebox played a tune so faint it sounded like it came from underwater. The woman behind the counter didn't say hello. She just looked at me like she'd been waiting. "Coffee?" she asked, already pouring. I nodded, slid onto a stool. The mug was chipped, the liquid black and steaming. There was a man in the corner booth. I hadn't noticed him at first. He was sitting perfectly still, face shadowed by the dim red light of the neon outside. I caught his reflection in the window, eyes fixed on me, not blinking, not moving. I turned to look at him directly. The booth was empty. A small chill crawled up my spine. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the storm, the road, and the caffeine were playing tricks. Still, the air felt heavier. The waitress spoke again. "Rough night out there," she said. "Yeah," I muttered. "Storm came out of nowhere." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It always does around here. Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. The jukebox skipped. The same line of the song replayed 3 times. Then silence, no hum, no clink of dishes, no wind outside, just absolute stillness. I cleared my throat. "You got a restroom?" She pointed down a narrow hallway. "Past the ice machine, don't stay long." That last part, "don't stay long," hit me wrong, like she wasn't joking. The hallway was lit by a single flickering bulb. The walls seemed to close in as I walked, water dripping from a pipe somewhere. The restroom door creaked open, and for a moment I thought I saw someone's shadow move across the tiles. But when I turned on the light, it was just me. I splashed water on my face, looked in the mirror, and froze. Behind me in the reflection, a man stood at the door. But when I turned around, nothing. The door was open, the hallway empty. No footsteps, no sound. I shut off the light and went back to the counter. The waitress was gone, so was the coffee pot. The jukebox had stopped completely, the only sound the rain slamming against the windows. The place looked darker now, like someone had dimmed it when I wasn't looking. That's when I saw him again. The man in the corner booth, same seat, same shadowed face. Only this time he was turned toward the window watching the lot. I walked over slowly, heart thudding against my ribs. "Hey, you good there, buddy?" No answer. His plate was untouched, eggs cold, coffee half full. But the steam was rising like it had just been poured. That's when something clicked in my mind. The air inside wasn't cold anymore. The rain outside had stopped. But the steam kept rising, twisting upward like breath. I stepped back. My boot hit something, metal. I looked down and saw an old keychain on the floor, covered in rust. It said, 247 stop, room 3. I turned to ask the waitress about it, but the diner was empty again. The lights over the booths were off. My reflection in the window looked pale, eyes wide. I couldn't hear my own breathing. I walked out fast, didn't even look back. When I stepped outside, the lot was empty. My rig was still there. But the other 2 trucks, gone. No tire marks, no sound of engines, just silence stretching for miles. I climbed into the cab, locked the door, and started the engine. The radio crackled back to life on its own. A voice came through the static, faint but clear. "Don't stop there twice!" That's when the headlights flickered. For half a second, in the beam of the light, I saw a figure standing near the sign. A man, hands in pockets, watching me leave. I hit the gas and didn't look back. When I made it to the next town, I stopped at a real truck stop, bright, noisy, alive. I asked the guy at the counter about 247 truck stop. He looked at me like I'd said a curse word. "There's no stop like that anymore," he said. "Burned down years ago. Caught fire after midnight. 2 truckers in." I told him that was impossible. I'd just been there, drank the coffee, heard the jukebox. He didn't argue, just shook his head and walked away. That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that empty booth, the untouched plate, the steaming cup. I tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, a dream, a hallucination from too many miles and too little rest. But here's the thing. When I checked my dash cam the next morning, the footage cut out at exactly 12:47 a.m., right when I pulled in. When it came back, I was already on the highway again, and on the passenger seat was that same rusty keychain. Room 3. I never drove that route again. And if you ever find yourself on Highway 247 after midnight, keep driving. I've spent most of my life behind the wheel of a truck, and when you drive through the night long enough, the road starts talking to you. You begin to see things out there, shapes that shift in your mirrors, lights that don't belong to any car, faces that fade just as you blink. But this story isn't about shadows. It's about one person, and one mistake I'll never, ever forget. It was late, close to 1 in the morning, somewhere along Route 66 in northern Arizona. The desert stretched out like an endless black ocean, the sky low and heavy with clouds. I'd been listening to static for hours, just trying to stay awake, when I saw her. A figure standing by the side of the road. She was wearing a white dress that glowed in my headlights, barefoot, holding her arms around herself like she was freezing. No bag, no jacket, nothing, just standing there, thumb out, eyes fixed on the dark. I slowed down. Something deep in my gut was screaming at me not to, but I did it anyway. When you've been driving this long, you learn to help people when you can. It's a kind of unspoken rule among us truckers. You don't leave someone stranded in the middle of nowhere. I rolled the window down. "I'd need a ride?" I asked. She just nodded once, her voice barely a whisper above the wind. "Just a few miles." I unlocked the passenger door. She climbed in slowly, like she'd done it 100 times before, like she'd been waiting for me. Her hair was long and wet, clinging to her shoulders, and she smelled like rain, even though the air outside was bone dry. For a while, we didn't talk. The hum of the tires on the asphalt filled the silence, steady and hypnotic. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see her, sitting perfectly still, just staring straight ahead. After about 10 minutes, I tried to break the quiet. "Where you headed?" She hesitated for a moment. "Home." "Where's that?" She turned her head just slightly toward me. "Down the road." That answer didn't help much, but I didn't push it. Everyone has their reasons for being quiet out here on these lonely stretches of highway. Another few miles passed. Then I noticed something odd. Her reflection in the windshield. It didn't quite match her movements. It was just a flicker, a slight delay, like the glass was showing me something a second too late. I told myself it was just fatigue, rubbed my eyes hard, and focused back on the road. Then she finally spoke again. "You ever get lonely out here?" The question caught me completely off guard. "Sometimes. It just comes with the job." She nodded slowly. "It's easy to disappear when no one's looking." That sentence, it didn't sound right. Something about the way she said it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We passed an old sign, half buried in the desert sand. The letters were faded, but I could just make them out. Welcome to Ashwood. The problem was, I'd never heard of a town called Ashwood, and Route 66, I'd driven it more times than I can count. There was no Ashwood on it. Is that where you live? I asked her. Yes, she said softly. Almost there. A few minutes later, she pointed ahead. Turn left. I hesitated. There was no road there. Just a narrow dirt path cutting straight through the desert. No lights, no houses, just pure blackness. You sure? I asked. She didn't answer. She just stared ahead, her eyes wide. So I turned anyway. The truck rattled over rocks, my headlights slicing through the dark. And then I saw it. A small, run-down house sitting all alone in the distance, a single light glowing faintly in the window. When I pulled up, she turned to me for the very first time. Her face looked tired, but calm. Thank you for the ride, she whispered. No problem, I said, forcing a smile. You gonna be okay out here? She nodded once, opened the door, and stepped out into the dust. I waited, expecting her to walk up to the house, but she didn't. She just stood there, still as a stone, watching my truck. Something inside me was screaming at me to leave, to get out of there right now. I shifted into gear and pulled away, keeping my eyes locked on the rearview mirror. She was still standing there when I turned back onto the highway. I drove for another hour before finally stopping at a rest area. My hands were shaking. I couldn't explain why. I just kept thinking about how cold she looked, how she said the word home like it was something she hadn't used in a long, long time. Eventually, I fell asleep in the cab. When morning came, I grabbed some breakfast at a diner near the next town. The waitress poured my coffee and asked if I was heading west. Yeah, I said, came up from Ashwood last night. She froze mid-pour. Where? Ashwood, small place off Route 66, took a dirt road in. Her face went pale. There's no town called Ashwood, sir, not anymore. I frowned. What do you mean? She glanced over at an older man sitting at the counter. He turned, studied me for a moment, then said, You talking about that house by the old quarry? Yeah, I said, had a single light on. I picked up a girl, white dress, long dark hair, said she lived there. The man's expression hardened. That place burned down 20 years ago. A young woman died inside. Her folks left, and no one's lived there since. I laughed nervously. You're kidding me, right? He didn't smile. Ain't funny. The waitress leaned in closer. People still see her sometimes. Folks say she waves down drivers on stormy nights, always barefoot, always in white. I didn't know what to say. My coffee had gone cold. I left a few minutes later, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. Maybe they were wrong. Maybe it was another house, another girl. Maybe I'd just imagined half of it. But halfway down the highway, something caught my eye. The passenger seatbelt was buckled. I swear I hadn't touched it, and on the floor mat, half buried under the dust, was a small silver locket. I opened it, and inside was a faded picture of the same house I'd dropped her at, the same front porch. That night, I left the locket at a rest stop miles away. I didn't want it in my truck. I didn't want to think about it ever again. But sometimes, when I'm out there alone and the desert is quiet, I still catch myself glancing at the passenger seat, half expecting to see her sitting there again, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the horizon. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever seen something on the road you can't explain, let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more tales from the road. Stay safe out there. You spend enough years on the road and you start to collect stories. Not the kind people tell at diners or bars, but the ones whispered at fuel pumps over static-filled radios when the night feels way too long. Every highway's got a stretch like that, a place drivers avoid. For us, it's mile marker 247. I'd heard the whispers since my first long haul out of Colorado. Old-timers said weird things happen there. Radios cut out. GPS freezes. Fog so thick it just swallows your headlights whole. Some even swore they'd seen people walking along the shoulder at 3 in the morning, only to vanish when they slowed down to get a better look. Honestly, I never bought into it. I've been driving for 20 years. I've seen worse things in a packed truck stop than I ever have on the open road. So when my route lined up with 247 one cold night in November, I didn't think twice. The weather had turned fast. Low clouds, wind picking up, no moon in the sky. The highway was completely empty, just my rig slicing through the darkness. The hum of the tires on the asphalt was hypnotic, a steady rhythm in the quiet. And then the fog rolled in. It wasn't a slow drift. It was like someone had just dropped a heavy curtain right in front of my windshield. 1 second, I could see the road stretching out ahead. The next, nothing. I immediately slowed down, flicking on my hazard lights. The air itself felt different, heavy, almost electric. When I passed the next sign, I barely made it out through the thick mist. Mile 247. It was just a green marker on a half-bent metal post, nothing special. But I swear, the second my truck passed it, the radio cut to pure static. Not unusual, I told myself. Mountains can mess with the signal all the time. Still, my hands felt clammy on the steering wheel. That's when I noticed the headlights behind me. They appeared out of nowhere. First one set, then 2, then 3. They looked like old models, maybe Fords or Chevys from the 70s. Their beams were this weird dim yellow, aimed too low, and they flickered like they were struggling just to stay on. I checked my mirrors again. They were tailing me close, way too close for this kind of weather. I tried radioing on the CB, calling out to any other drivers in the area. No response, just that hissing static. All right, I muttered to myself, some local jerks having a bit of fun. I downshifted, planning to let them pass, but they didn't. They just stayed right behind me, matching my speed, maintaining the same eerie distance. Then one of them honked. It was this long, low sound, like a foghorn. It rattled right through my chest. That's when I decided to pull off. I spotted a small turnout on the right, barely visible in the fog. I eased the rig over, put it in park, and waited for the cars to finally pass me by. But when I looked back up, the road behind me was empty. No lights, no sound, nothing. The fog pressed in, thick and suffocating against the glass. I could barely see the hood of my own truck. Suddenly my radio crackled. It was faint at first, then it became chillingly clear. A man's voice came through, distorted but strangely calm. "You shouldn't have stopped." I froze. My heart was pounding. "Who is this?" I said, grabbing the mic. Static. Then complete silence again. The air inside the cab felt like it had dropped 10 degrees. My breath started fogging up the glass. I tried to start the engine. It coughed, it sputtered, and then it died. That's when I saw it. Movement in the fog. At first I thought it was just my own reflection on the wet windshield. But then I realized the shape was on the road. A person walking slowly, directly toward my truck. I leaned forward, squinting. The headlights barely cut through the mist, but I could make out enough. A tall figure, maybe a man, wearing a long coat that just hung loose on his frame. "Hey!" I shouted out the window. "You okay out there?" No answer. He stopped about 10 feet from my front bumper. Just stood there, perfectly still. The fog swirled around him, hiding his face in shadow. Then I heard it, a faint tapping sound, metal on metal. I glanced down at my dashboard. My fuel gauge needle. It was dropping. Fast. That's impossible, I thought. The tank had been full just 15 minutes ago. When I looked back up, the man was gone. I scanned the road, checked my mirrors, the shoulder, nothing but fog. That's when I noticed something else. My odometer. It was stuck. The numbers weren't moving at all. I don't know how long I sat there, just trying to make sense of any of it. But eventually, the fog started to thin. I hit the ignition again, and this time the engine roared back to life without a problem. I didn't think, I just drove. For 20 straight miles, I didn't see another soul on that road. Then I saw the blessed lights of a rest stop, a diner, civilization. I parked, stumbled inside, and ordered a black coffee with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The waitress gave me a concerned look. "You okay, hun?" "Yeah," I said, my voice hoarse. "Just a rough road." She nodded, then asked where I'd come from. "Eastbound," I told her. "Past mile 247 not too long ago." Her face changed. Instantly, all the color drained from it. She didn't say another word, just turned on her heel, walked into the kitchen, and whispered something to the cook. A moment later, the man came out. He was an older guy with a gray beard and a worn trucker's cap. "You stopped there?" he asked, his eyes serious. "Yeah," I said. "Why?" He pulled out a chair and sat right across from me. His voice dropped low. "Son, no one stops there. Not after what happened." I leaned in. "What happened?" He looked around, as if he didn't want anyone else to hear. 15 years back, a driver lost control in the fog. Tanker flipped, exploded, burned 3 cars that were right behind him. The whole stretch of road caught fire. They never found all the bodies. He paused, letting that sink in. "Some folks say, on foggy nights, you can still see the headlights of those cars, following you." I forced a laugh, but my throat was bone dry. "Yeah, well, I saw something. Could have been anything." He nodded slowly. "Could have been. But tell me this." He pointed at my sleeve. "Where'd you get that?" I looked down. There on my jacket was a black smear like soot. I rubbed it between my fingers, and the smell hit me immediately. Burnt fuel. I left the diner without finishing my coffee. Didn't even pay. When I got back in my truck, I checked the dash. The odometer had started moving again. But the mileage, it didn't make any sense. It showed 52 more miles than I had actually driven. And the radio, it played one last clear sentence before going completely silent. "Keep moving, driver." I haven't taken that route since. Sometimes, though, when the fog sets in and the road gets too quiet, I swear I can still see a faint glow in my mirrors, like old headlights, way back in the dark, just following. Maybe it's just bad luck. Maybe it's the road remembering. Or maybe some miles never really let you leave. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've got road stories of your own, drop them in the comments below. And if you like this kind of content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there.